Hi, I'm Carly Brantz, the Chief Marketing Officer at DigitalOcean, and today I'm thrilled to be sitting down with Gabe Monroy, our new Chief Product Officer at DigitalOcean. Welcome, Gabe.
Thanks, Carly. It's great to be here.
Why don't we start by you telling me a little bit about your background and why you're so excited to be at DigitalOcean?
Sure. Well, I'm coming at DigitalOcean from Microsoft, where I led some product groups for the Azure team, responsible for the developer-facing services, platform services, compute services, tools, for the Azure team. But before that, I was actually a developer and entrepreneur. I had some software companies, sold the most recent one to Microsoft, that brings me to DigitalOcean today.
And what excites you about DigitalOcean's focus on startups and small to medium-sized businesses?
Well, I myself come from a startup background, so I'm really passionate about just the problems that those kind of developers are facing out there, the challenges of being an entrepreneur and trying to do a lot, with a little. Your tools need to go a long way. Your cloud provider needs to really be offering a set of services that can help accelerate you as a real core partner in your journey to the cloud.
How has the use of Kubernetes changed over time, and what has surprised you about that evolution?
Well, the Kubernetes project and the predecessor project, the Docker project, they started off as really niche, small efforts in open source ecosystems. And fast forward to today, and these projects have totally changed the industry, right? Containers, container orchestration, Kubernetes, it's a bit like heavy machinery. You got to be trained in how to operate it. And I think when you think about developers who are on a journey of trying to deliver innovation to their customers and run a business, sometimes Kubernetes and its complexity can get in the way of, solving some of those problems. I, was fortunate enough to have a front row seat to the development of Kubernetes. I myself, friends a long while back with Solomon Hykes, the co-founder of Docker, friends with Brendan Burns, one of the co-creators of Kubernetes, who was actually my partner in crime at Microsoft. We were building products together. So I got to watch the Kubernetes community, from its inception through becoming a very massive and widely adopted technology. I had the luxury of, sitting on the board of directors of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and what I loved about that foundation is it's the one spot where you have representatives from some of the largest companies in the world all sitting together talking about how you can use technologies like Kubernetes to advance the state of the art for developers across the world. And so that's been really surprising how much Kubernetes has had a positive impact on the open source industry.
At DigitalOcean, we support the open source community through several initiatives, including Hacktoberfest. What does open source mean to you, and why is it important?
Well, open source has been near and dear to my heart. I've been working in open source for a long time. One of my mentors said something really great, which is open source is a way to scale the production of software beyond the confines of a single company. With open source, you can actually have people from multiple companies operating on a single piece of software and really getting that community leverage and benefit in a way that I think is hard to get through other means. One of the other elements is open source ends up providing almost like a peer review capability, such that any software that's developed in the open, when it comes to things like security or just the quality of the software, if there's a healthy community that's underpinning that, where you're having reviews of the code, you're having reviews of the documentation from a wide array of folks, not just working from one company, but working from lots of companies or just individual developers, that produces higher quality software in the end. And I think that's part of the reason that open source is so successful today.
DigitalOcean recently acquired Nimbella, a serverless platform. Where do you see the serverless industry going in the future, and what are some of the benefits of using serverless?
Well, serverless is something that's near and dear to my heart as well. I was responsible for the serverless products inside of Azure also. And one of the things that is just a recurring theme is developers want to write code that represents the innovation that they want to provide to their customers. We talk about this as business logic. They don't want to deal with infrastructure, mucking around with containers and VMs and all this kind of infrastructure-y stuff. They just want to write code and have that code produce value, right? And serverless has has that promise. It has that ability to provide the fastest path from idea to code to cloud. And I think that's something that, I'm excited to help work on delivering for customers.
What do you think is the next big trend in the cloud industry?
Or another way of asking the question, I suppose, is what's after serverless, right? Because I think a lot of people today think of serverless as the trend. I think it's fair to say locationless is the trend after serverless, which is, today, if you go to a cloud provider and say, I have this piece of code or I have this container, please run it for me, you have to include what region you want to run that code in that request, right? So I want to run this in West US, or I want to run this in Asia, or I want to run this in wherever. What if in the future you didn't have to provide that? You could just run your piece of code and it would run across a global network of servers, and it would just get hosted wherever your end users were.
I like it. You heard it here first. All right, and because we like to have a little fun around here, the last question is just sort of silly. If you could be any animal in the ocean, what would it be and why?
Oh, well, I'd have to be a Caribbean reef squid. And my family's from the Caribbean. My father was born in Cuba. My mother was born on an island off the coast of Venezuela. And when I'm down there, I get to swim in the oceans. And when I was diving there, I saw this reef squid, and then it didn't want to see me anymore. And so it just merged into the background, and it just kind of disappeared because it, had some chemicals in its body to allow it to do that. And I just thought that was the coolest thing ever.
That is
to just
amazing.
be able to camouflage and, just appear as whatever.
Appear.
Disappear, reappear at will.
I like it. I like it. Well, again, we're so excited to have you at DigitalOcean. Thanks for joining us at Deploy, and I'm sure we'll be hearing much more from Gabe in the future.
Thanks for having me.